Welcome to another episode of Stories from the Workbench. I'm Pastor Dave Carl, and this is my Shop of Wonders. Today I want to talk about power. Now, I have tools in the shop that are power tools. And what we mean by that usually is electricity or something else. But I would like to propose that in one way or another, all tools are power tools. These are nail guns. Now, there are nail guns that are powered by batteries, but my nail guns are powered by compressed air. Now, you might be thinking, how could compressed air drive a power tool? I assure you, it can. So it's no small job to drive a nail into, say, a piece of molding. Now, normally you wouldn't be driving a nail into molding on a workbench. It would be on a wall or up against the ceiling on a wall, which would make it that much more difficult. But to drive the nail into a piece of molding flush without banging up the molding with your hammer. Ugh. Typically, you'd use a hammer to get it close, and then you'd use a nail set to drive it in the last little bit. You want it a little lower than the surface so you can fill the hole in later with wood putty and then perhaps paint. The nail gun does all of those steps very nicely and every time. This is an oscillating multi-tool. Now, oscillating is our fun new word for the day, and to oscillate means you go back and forth at a regular speed. In this case, a very fast regular speed. The multi-tool does not spin like a table saw or a circular saw. It goes back and forth at a regular speed. It oscillates. Oscillate! It cuts very nicely through this molding. In fact, because it oscillates back and forth, it can plunge cut straight down into wood. Making a slight cut just a bit wider than the blade itself. This is very unique among tools. A chisel can't do that. You would need to make a much wider hole with the chisel to get down to the same depth. And a handsaw can't do that. You'd have to cut all the way across to get any depth. So, oscillating is good. Oscillate! With different blades, it can cut through drywall and wood. It can cut through tile and ceramics. It can chip things up off glue, off of concrete and floors. It can sand very difficult things. And the different sizes of the blades, you can cut a very small slot when you plunge cut. When this tool is in motion, there is a lot of power focused onto this little edge of metal. Focused power. And lastly for today is my set of carving tools. They come in various shapes and sizes. Now, I'm not much of a carver. This takes artistry and skill and a lot of practice. Now, a lot of power can be focused on the very sharp edge of this tool to cut through even hardwood. Some are made to cut grooves, and others cut in a V shape. I did manage to carve the ears of my Windsor chair. It took me quite a while. I did not want to mess this up. As you might be gathering, today I'm talking about power being used in a very focused way. Okay, it's story time. And today's story is God and Samson. Now, because this is a Bible story, and I may have said this before, because this is a Bible story, I want to tell you something. Everything in the Bible is true. It really happened. Well, if you know anything about the story of Samson, you remember that God made him superhero kind of strong. And he also made him a judge over Israel. Well, if you saw our episode on Gideon, you might remember that before there were kings in Israel, there were people that God called on to lead the nation, and they were called judges. God would speak to them, and they would typically help the nation out with a bad season with their enemies. Now, Gideon did that, and Samson was called on to do that as well. Israel had once again wandered away from God, following after idols. This is Baal, this is Dagon. And they were fickle and would not obey completely. Let's worship God. Oh, let's worship Baal. Oh, let's worship God. Let's worship Dagon. Let's worship God. Baal, God, Dagon. When it came to their commitment to God, you might say, they oscillated. Oscillate! So as he promised, God allowed the nations nearby, the Philistines, to move in, take charge, and make things really hard on the nation of Israel.
Okay, Israel, I am here to burn your crops and steal your livestock and take your lunch money. Now, say thank you.
I am so sad and scared. Ah! The Philistines, they didn't care about God, and they did terrible stuff all the time. And now they were in charge. So after 40 years of this kind of torment, God chose to set a baby apart to help. And that baby was Samson. So this is Samson's mom. Nice hairdo, huh? That's tree bark. Anyway, God sent an angel to tell Samson's mom,
even though you have been unable to have children, you will soon become pregnant and give birth to a son. His hair must never be cut, for he will be dedicated to God as a Nazirite. He will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines.
Now, I was basically raised in church, and we were taught all of the Bible stories. It was a great church. They really taught from the Bible. I had a bunch of friends there, and they even had a soda machine inside the church. I mean, this was a great church. They taught us about the great stories in the Bible, like Abraham and Noah and, well, Samson. So these stories were taught to me in such a way that I figured I was supposed to try to be just like them. These men that God used, after all, were heroes. Most of them. But not all. So the problem is, when we come to this story of Samson, this is not a guy you want to be like. I'm going to tell you up front, Samson was not a very good guy. So why would God use a guy that was not very good? Well, that's a great question. It's a pleasure to be in the shop with such a good question asker like you. So let's get into the story. So this is Samson with really long hair. My wife thought he looked a lot like Patrick Swayze. So maybe Samson was a product of the 80s. I don't know. Anyway, he has really long hair. And this is Samson's new friend, Daryl. Now you might notice right away that they're both basically the same size. Now whenever they've made a movie about Samson or drawn a picture of what they think he looked like, they always cast him or draw him like a giant bodybuilding muscle man. Now, this is my opinion, but I think Samson probably looked no bigger and had no more muscles than, say, Daryl, who lived next door. So God gave Samson miraculous super strength. It's not because he worked out a bunch. His strength was supposed to be narrowly focused and miraculous for a really big reason. Hey, Samson, how about we go drink some wine, go poke a stick at a dead donkey I saw this morning, and then go to the barber? I think I'm going to go high and tight this time. Daryl, I can't. I took a vow as a child to be separated for God. You see, I'm a Nazirite. We cannot drink wine, touch dead things, or get our hair cut. Now, some people take this vow for 30 days. I am a Nazirite for life. Wow. Why do you want to do all that? Well, because God wants me to free Israel and torment the Philistines. Hey, want to be a Nazirite too? I don't, no thanks. Maybe I'll just get a little off the top this time. Hey, look, a stray cat. A cat! Ugh. Yeah, so Daryl's got this thing. He's terrified of cats, and it's kind of a problem. Anyway, sometime later, Samson and Daryl went to a Philistine town. Now remember, the Philistines were constantly doing things to hurt the nation of Israel. And as the judge leader of Israel, Samson, he was supposed to be working and using his focused power to free Israel and torment the Philistines. Instead, he was hanging around Philistine towns, doing stuff he was not supposed to do. So this is where he starts to get really off course. This is a really cute Philistine girl. Hey there, cutie. I'm Samson.
I know who you are. What are you doing here? I thought you weren't supposed to leave Israel.
That's what I've been saying. Come on, let's get out of here. Yeah, well, I'm kind of a big deal, so I pretty much do what I want. Hey, want to get married?
Wait, what?
Wait, what? Okay, so much for focused power, huh? This is going to start going pretty fast, so let's keep a tally of things Samson did wrong in this story. Now, as was true for every man in Israel in the Old Testament, Samson was not supposed to marry outside of Israel, and certainly not to a Philistine girl. Hey, Mom, Dad, I saw a totally cute Philistine girl. Go set it up so I can marry her. Wait, what? Wait, what? So when it was all set up, Samson and his new friend Daryl were traveling to the wedding. And while they were walking, I'm in love, and I don't care who knows it. Roar. I am a ferocious lion, and I think I'm going to have you both for lunch. A cat! Ugh. Wowsy dowsy. Why would you say something like that? It feels like the power of the Lord just came over me. Well, that's weird. So the lion pounced on Samson, but because the power of the Lord, Samson grabbed that lion and killed him easily with his bare pipe cleaner hands that I clearly forgot to put on Samson. Ooh, maybe Samson grabbed the lion and then punched him right, and then left, and then right, and left, and right. Maybe he oscillated.
Oscillate!
Oh, that was amazing! Well, preparations for the wedding were underway. The next day, Samson was walking along the road, and he went off the road to take a look at that dead lion, because, well, I know it's hard to understand for you girls, but this is what guys do. There you are, you tricky lion. What is going on here? Samson got closer only to find there was a beehive inside of the yucky dead body of that lion. Now Samson, the Nazarite, who was not supposed to touch anything dead, well, he scooped up honey with his hands to have a snack. That's disgusting. Oh. Well, next he got mad because he lost a bet and he needed to pay some Philistine men 30 sets of clothes. Now, that was worth a lot of money that, well, he didn't have. So he went to a nearby town, he killed 30 Philistine men, took their clothes, and paid off his debt. So as you can imagine, this did not do anything to free Israel, though it was certainly tormenting to the Philistines. His power is becoming increasingly unfocused. And by the way, to her credit, the Philistine girl did not want to marry Samson.
I am done with you.
After several misadventures, Samson was cornered by 1,000 Philistine soldiers. He picked up the jawbone of a nearby dead donkey. Remember about the dead things he's not supposed to touch? He picked up the jawbone of a nearby dead donkey and he killed all of the soldiers. Maybe he took that donkey's jawbone and maybe he swung it right and left and right and left. And you got to know where I'm going with this, right? And maybe he oscillated.
Oscillate!
God did an amazing thing here. Whoa, did you see that? I was totally amazing. Do you see the problem? Samson was doing all of this stuff for himself. His God-given power was being used to draw attention to himself. This is not focused power. Now God, however, was going to accomplish his plan even with a self-centered, cotton-headed ninny-muggins. So God wanted the Philistines to be disrupted and weakened. And that was happening, but it could have been so much better for Samson if he had followed God and used his power in a responsible, God-focused way. You'll see why in just a minute.
Hello there. I'm Delilah.
Well, look at this. Hello there, cutie. We better get out of here. There's something about this does not feel right. Daryl, look over there. There's cats sneaking up behind you. What?
Is he all right?
He's fine. I'm about to pass out, though, just looking at you. Now, Delilah was a very pretty Philistine girl, and Samson, he fell like a stone. The Philistine bad guys got to Delilah.
Okay, Delilah. Find out where Samson's miraculous strength comes from.
Eventually, he told her, "Well, sweetheart, if ever I were to cut my hair, I would be as weak as any other man." "Oh, I think I gotta take a little nap right now." Well, not surprisingly, she had a bad guy sneak in and cut his hair while he was asleep. Then a bunch of other guys came in and captured him, and they even poked out his eyes and made him blind. They made him a slave and forced him to grind grain. All of that God-given power was wasted because Samson would not serve God with a single focus. In time, however, his hair started to grow back. Well, the Philistines threw a grand party, and there were thousands of Philistines at this party, and this was the best building in town. This was a big party. Well, they got bored after a little while, and they called out to bring Samson out. They wanted to be entertained. They brought him out in order to make fun of him. And they, unfortunately for them, they put him between two pillars. "O sovereign Lord, remember me again. O God, please strengthen me just one more time. With one blow, let me pay back the Philistines for the loss of my 2 eyes." He felt his strength come back, and he pushed on those 2 pillars with the pipe cleaner hands that I didn't give him in his either. He pushed the pillars apart, and the roof came caving in and crashed on everybody. And in that one act, he killed more Philistines than he had in his entire life. I'm not going to tell you how many times I had to do this in order to get it right. So God used him, but in the end it could have been so much different. Samson sometimes did the right thing and sometimes did the selfish and dumb thing. You might say, sadly, he oscillated. Samson was a frustrating example of what the nation of Israel was. Self-centered, and sometimes obedient, sometimes rebellious. The story of Samson tells us mostly of how great God is and how much he wants to bless us if only we would just follow him and love him completely. Oscillation is good for some tools. It's terrible for relationships. Let's commit completely to loving God and just see what he'll do. Well, that's our story for today. And as is typical, there was much more to the story of Samson than we had time to get into today. So you can read more about Samson in the book of Judges, beginning in chapter 13. Well, thanks for being with me in the workshop, and we will see you next time.